Okay, we're live.
Great, thank you very much, Mansoor. Welcome, everyone. This is another Product People community event. We have live events every Tuesday in the evening if you're in Europe, in a different time, if you're in different time zone, but still every Tuesday. And we're happy to welcome you to another one of this regular series. We're streaming this event on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitch. So if you're up to this, please share with your colleagues and friends, whoever might be interested in the live stream right now. If you are with us on Zoom, please be aware that this is streamed live, and if you don't want your face to be visible on the live stream, please turn off your camera. But if you're fine with that, please leave it on. It's always nice for a speaker and for participants of the call to see you, also your face. Today we have a very exciting topic, 5 rules for growth, how to scale a product to millions of users, for which we were incredibly lucky to catch Christopher Osborne from his very busy schedule with this intensive growth of DeepL. Actually very curious who of the people watching us have used DeepL on their own. Maybe you can just put a plus in the chat wherever you are on Zoom, or if you're watching us on live stream. I think curious for me and definitely for Christopher. And while we are collecting your pluses, I want to also give a short introduction about myself and Product People. So my name is Victoria. I'm product manager with Product People. Background that I have is in neuroscience research. I've been doing this for some time, but then got a bit bored and switched to more fast-paced commercial environment and found my passion in product management. And I've been with Product People for the last 1.5 years. Product People is a product management consultancy, and we help companies discover and deliver great products faster. And we do this by both supporting this product community for which the events are part of the community, but also we do this through our engagements with different companies where we do product management work on interim basis. It starts from 3 months and can be up to a year or even more. We onboard fast, align teams, and deliver outcomes, and make sure that the product is of the best possible quality. I will tell you a bit more about what are the use cases if you're wondering where in this interim PM works well. But now I want to already start moving towards the topic of our today's talk. These are some of our clients that you probably know, especially if you live in Germany. You definitely know Scout24 or Tier, maybe also know WeShare, Freeletics, and Zalando. And to prepare for the talk of tonight, that will begin by Christopher, I want to ask you 2 questions. The first one, or both questions will now appear for people on Zoom as a survey that you can vote in. If you're watching us on the live stream elsewhere, please just write in the chat and I will see and read to Christopher and to everyone in here what are the answers. And the first question is, do you have experience working in a high traffic product with an international footprint? And possible answers are yes or no. And second, what is the biggest challenge for growth of your product? A, strategy, B, innovation, C, user acquisition, D, monetization, or E, other. If you select this one, we're also very curious what exactly you see as the biggest challenge for growth. Please write your comment in the chat on Zoom or in a different service where you're watching us. And we will now spend a bit of time to let people answer. I will also answer myself based on my current engagement. I also see that Christopher gives the answer. Good. I hope you can answer your own challenge, at least partially, Christopher. Recruiting enough people fast enough. And Mirella, who is the founder of Product People, now joined here as well. She says the same. Same for us, for product people. Recruiting great people is a challenge, and often also specifically for growth. I see some answers started coming in on YouTube, and also now the answers on Zoom. If you're with us on Zoom, you see the answers pop up. If for those who are not on Zoom, I'm going to announce them. So for the first question, do you have experience working in high traffic product with international footprint? Our audience is divided almost in very close to parts. So 43% said yes, 57 said no. People on YouTube I see have similar 50-50 division. For the second question, what's the biggest challenge for growth of your product? Interestingly, people also, there's no clear winner. Most people said user acquisition, 36%, but also strategy and innovation got 21% equally, and monetization 14%. For those who voted other, feel free to add comment and I will read them. Okay, I see user retention is also mentioned on YouTube. And I wonder, Christopher, are you surprised by these answers, specifically answers to the number 2, or something expected? What did you hypothesize before we asked the question to the audience?
Well, to be frank, I didn't really think about it too much. I replied to your email in about 1 minute, but I am a little bit surprised by number 1. I expected that actually, yes, to be much lower. Perhaps maybe this is some biases I see in the European market. Maybe I should have said global rather than international, because I do think that some of the problems that the European, well, not some, a lot of the problems that European tech companies have with growth is that by default they bias to their domestic market. And you know, the web by default is global, so it's just like one of the biggest handicaps that I see in Europe right now. It's like, talk to a lot of Dutch startups, their capital comes in quite a limited amount, and the people putting the capital in are quite conservative, and they always say focus on Benelux, or just focus on winning your domestic market. So if you start off with the ambition just to win in the Netherlands, this is not a good growth strategy to start with, frankly. So yeah, it's maybe some biases from what I've seen, but that's interesting. Maybe we've got a lot of people who are working successfully at scale. But maybe it's interesting follow-up question of whether it's global or whether it's just in like a couple of countries.
I would also hypothesize that the audience we got today is probably many people who are interested in growth because they work in quite international or global products. But anyways, at this point, I will stop sharing my screen and invite you, Christopher, to share yours and to start your talk. And I wish us a joyful time.
Okay, thank you. I assume everything's working correctly. If it's not, please do interrupt me.
Looks good.
And I sometimes have a habit of speaking ahead of the slides. So if I'm speaking about a slide which isn't on the screen, also please somebody shout that I haven't pressed the nuts key.
All right.
Okay.
We will.
So let's go. Yeah. Good evening. My name is Christopher, and I'm VP of Product at DeepL. DeepL is the world's most accurate translation app with millions of users every day. And today, I want to share some of what I learned in my 15-year journey making products. I first started out making my own products, literally by myself, in the very early days of the London startup scene. And by early, there was really just 5 startups back then. It was not something that people did. Like, you went to a good university, you went into consultancy, banking, or a regular career. People were not going into startups. There was no ecosystem, and frankly, like Europe was like a really dead zone for startups and tech. But being early stage, I also got to meet a lot of great people, actually. So I was really able to learn a lot of stuff fast by being around some really smart people who are doing things for themselves. So after multiple startups, varying degrees of success and failure, I joined a company called Booking.com, which now most people know. But back then, I mean, it was big in terms of revenue, but it was just beginning to scale. And by scale, I mean doubling the number of people and teams between every 12 to 18 months. So it was already scaled operationally before I joined. There's thousands of people in customer service and account management all across the globe. But tech and product teams was still just 150 people back then. And then when I left 6 years later, there was 3,000 people in tech and product. So yeah, huge, very fast growth. I was very lucky to be in the right place at the right time. Like anybody who's founded or been part of one of these very successful tech companies, like if they don't say that they were also lucky and their timing was lucky, then they're probably lying to you. So yeah, like I got lucky in being in the right place at the right time, and got to learn a lot in 6 years. But I left and I joined DeepL. It's obviously much earlier stage, but it's on exactly the same growth curve. When I joined, the month before I joined, the product team was 1 person. We've gone to more than 20 people across product management, design, and data science in just 20 months. So growing very fast. And what I want to share with you is what I learned in scale-ups going through this very fast growth, and also how I currently apply it to DeepL as we continue to scale to hundreds of millions of users. So to start off, now this is where I struggle to find my Zoom controls. Here we go, perfect. Try a little bit of interaction first off to get us warmed up. And as I said before people joined, I spent enough time in the last 2 years talking to myself that I think it's nice to have a bit of interaction with other people on the call. So open your chat box if you can, if you're in Zoom or in YouTube. And let's go with the first rule, which is about finding a growth formula and about execution. So when it comes to growth, or just in tech in general, a lot of people talk about innovation. But innovation by itself is never going to create a fast-growing company. Execution and how well and how fast you can execute and get things done is going to define how successful you are as a company. And typically, there's some kind of growth engine or formula behind that which you execute on. So I'd like to share an example of a hugely successful product company, and I'm going to share piece by piece some information with you, and I'd like, whenever you have a thought about who it could be, just drop it in the chat channel, and people will probably read it out to me as we go. So first piece, my research is a little bit old now, or couldn't get everything, but the annual revenue was about $60 billion in 2018. So like really big, global scale. Probably not going to get it just from revenue figures. So I'll go one or more. They released at least, this is the ones that I could count, there might be more. They released at least 10 new products in 2018. Any guesses so far? Don't see any in Zoom, so I'm going to keep going. Feel free to shout them out if you come in the channels. One product alone launched in 2018 and $1.2 billion in direct revenue.
I see there are 2 guesses in Zoom.
I don't. Oh, Facebook, no. Intuit, wrong. Anybody else?
Rockstar from YouTube.
Also wrong. Let's keep going. partnerships and third-party integrations will 10x their revenue. So they found some really interesting ways to build feedback and revenue and network effects. Anybody else?
TikTok, I see on Zoom Zapier.
Absolutely not TikTok. I would never use a cancerous social media app as an example in any of my presentations.
That's a strong opinion, okay.
I have very strong opinions on social media, and I'm happy to discuss them at the end of the presentation. Anybody else? Any thoughts? What else was there after I slandered TikTok?
MuleSoft is a suggestion on
MuleSoft.
YouTube.
MuleSoft, no, not MuleSoft. Okay, I'm just gonna go for it now. It's Disney. That was that $1.2 billion product, which they got 10x revenue from. And Disney, although they've changed their appearance now, and you can see them talking about the metaverse, they're starting to sound more modern. It's a company that's old enough that like people just don't think about it as a product company. And you also would not say they're particularly innovative, it's not in the past. But what's really important about it is that they found a winning formula, and they could figure out how they could create network effects and multiple revenues of the products they produce. Also really important, if you've got kids of a certain age, you'll probably have seen some of these things. And when you watch these things, you can just see like they really understand how to create a great product. Like it's a factory, it's a production line. Of course, some of them don't make it or some of them are good, but you know, they'll produce 20 of these a year and 10 of them will absolutely smash it out of the park. So they really know and understand how to do this well. And then they also understand how to multiply the revenue, and they can just replicate that again and again. So what's super interesting about this, and I like these examples often because we like to think that everything we do in the tech world is super modern and clever and new and innovative. Their original like growth engine or their formula was understood and sketched out by Walt Disney back in 1957. So he figured out that if he owned the distribution of their content by publishing books and comics, this would also in turn promote their characters in the movies, generating more growth. He'd licensed the characters to merchandise and toy manufacturers, which again put them in every toy store and in front of every kid. Created theme parks that people were inspired to visit by seeing their favorite movies and characters, and also like completely hooks people into like the Disney ecosystem as like real what's the word for like Uber fans, but like Disney has these stans. I think stans is the modern word for people who are into these things. But like most importantly, he just figured out how he could create network effects and this growth engine. So you know the growth engine system, it creates more demand and it adds more value to each of its different parts, and then you can multiply revenue and you can multiply growth. And then also what's interesting about Disney is at the very center of it was his creative studio, where Walt himself had been instrumental at teaching or creating this great methodology for creating products. And they really understood well how to create and execute on products that people loved. So rule number one, let's say for growth, and there's some examples for tech companies coming up immediately after this. It's like find your growth engine and then just focus on execution. Execution is way more important than innovation. Like I never met anyone who talks about innovation, like whoever executed on it in their lives. Like they talk about it a lot, but they don't know how to do it. Clearly, I haven't met Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, but you don't need to be Steve or Elon to execute. And in fact, those people probably spend the majority of their time building the best team of designers, engineers, PMs, whatever else, to focus on execution at the highest quality. Ideas really are just a commodity in tech companies, but execution at the highest level is not. So once you figure out your growth engine, then it's just all in focus on execution and doing it at the highest quality. Here's some real life tech examples. I suspect people have seen these before. I hope you've seen them before. And I think now that every like global scale tech company or scale up, like seeking major investment, has one of these at the center of what they do. Although interestingly, I have heard examples of like friends working in tech companies, etc. Like they don't have this. But anyway, on the left, you can see the original Amazon growth engine. Like Jeff Bezos realized that if you focused on customer experience and making Amazon the most convenient place to shop, that would in turn attract more customers, and more customers on the platform encourages more sellers to list their items on Amazon. A wider selection of stuff on Amazon gives a better customer experience, which brings more customers to the store. And so once you figure it out and you can get this spinning, you figure out ways to influence it and push it. But then any impact you have like actually has multiples. So this is what we call a flywheel. And on the right is now like a famous version for Uber. Exactly the similar thing, a similar concept. More customers on the platform leads to more drivers because they want to work. More drivers on the platform leads to a shorter waiting time. Shorter waiting time leads to a better experience, and this creates more demand. And I think Uber's driving KPI for multiple years was time to pick up, if I remember correctly from talking to Uber some time ago. It's like that just drove their whole business, or like it was the main KPI. Like, what can we do to influence faster pickup time? Anyhow, what's also useful about this, this is not the exact thing. I didn't want to use content from my old employer, but I found a replica on a blog. So this is pretty close to the growth flywheel had at booking.com. And the great thing about once you have this is that you really understand what are the things you want to impact. Excuse me. So Booking, obviously for me, my main priority is building the best customer experience. By understanding that if we invested and learned and understood how to improve the customer experience, also testing it and succeeding in testing it, we could create higher conversion. If we created higher conversion, we can spend more on online marketing. So obviously, if your website converts better than anybody else, you can actually push more ads out there because you've got better ROI. So better conversion leads to more money to spend on marketing. More money to spend on marketing means that you in turn attract more customers. And then for us, like having more customers and more users on the platform actually also then drove having more partners, as in people who sold hotel rooms or hotels. So we had this network effect and we understood it, but then ultimately like the clarity of just saying, these are the three things that we care about. The best customer experience, acquiring traffic at a positive ROI or AdWord marketing, and growth of partners on the platform. And then I think in practice, I always say like a good PM or a great PM always makes problems simple, or you take this complex and you make it simpler. I think it's exactly the same for strategy. Like a lot of people who talk about strategy all the time produce very complicated things, like multiple facets. At its most simple level, you should be able to understand, you should be able to express and have a strategy which just focuses on three things. And of course, it can get more complicated and more interesting as you drill down into those three areas. But rule number 2, have 3 simple priorities. It gives you like such real focus and clarity. And people like think in threes, right? If you put slides up and you have 3 bullet points, people will probably get and remember those 3. If you put 5, there's a chance that they will forget and not take in the full thing. So I think with anything, this just works pretty well. And it also enables you to organize really simply, like organize around these 3 things. And then everybody underneath it knows exactly what they're organized for and what they need to impact. And then you can move really fast with higher impact. That's rule number 2, just have 3 simple priorities. I think this works at a company level and a team level. Okay, next slide, I've got it to work. Rule number 3, So this is a favorite quote of mine from a brilliant physicist called Richard Feynman, who said, "Religion is a culture of faith, and science is a culture of doubt." So it's talking about the difference between religion and science. And religion is where you know something is true, or you just believe fully that this is true. And science is where you're not sure, or you don't know, you're not 100% sure of something. Caveat, if you see me moving around, it's a quite naughty dog who wants a lot of attention right now, and likes to distract me during meetings and presentations. So yeah, science, like, you have doubts. You have to explore, and you have to be open and be curious. So obviously, like booking, I think people know a lot of A/B testing, but in general, this is just like a scientific approach. Being open, being curious, and wanting to experiment and learn from that. And it's actually completely liberating, right? So you might have ideas of what is right, you might have ideas about how you can solve a problem, but you understand that maybe you don't actually have the answer, or you need to figure it out, and it's not just a one-stop solution. So actually knowing or understanding you must experiment to learn, it's actually quite liberating, at least for me. And of course, all big tech companies, anybody doing tech and product at elite level, they're all now heavily invested in experimentation. Understanding that knowing you're right is not a successful approach. Like, when you test things, you quickly find out that most things don't work. The often quoted statistic that I've seen is that 9 times out of 10 tests fail or don't reach anything significant. But a scientific method of testing, experimenting, of course, is successful because you really then understand what works, and it enables you to prioritize for impact because you know what is actually pushing your business forward. This is a slide that I made for booking and I used at other presentations, so I'm quite happy to share this one because it's something that I created, or indeed, actually, I think one of my teammates created. So this, I believe, should now be common practice, like the data-driven decision cycle. You can probably hear my dog sneezing. I hope there's not going to be multiple sneezes following up. Yeah, data-driven decision cycle. Start with an insight or an idea. First step is learn from data. Could be qualitative also, but typically data is a bit more useful. Form a hypothesis. What we expect to impact, how we're going to measure this, run the experiment, and then this basically gives us a lot of data from which we can learn and then iterate and run the process again. I think this should not be news to people here, but what I would emphasize is that at the very center of all of this, that's a quite strong dog, so excuse me. At the center of this is learning. So the reason to experiment is to learn. And as I mentioned, like a big believer in the scientific method or methodology, if we really follow this process through, we can really learn what is good for our customers, what's good for the product, and what's good for our business. And then to top that off, another great quote from Richard Feynman, we're trying to prove ourselves wrong as quickly as possible, because only in that way can we find progress. So scientific method and experimentation will help to learn, but what we also do at DeepL is optimize for speed of learning. Like, always think like, what's the fastest way we can learn? And also thinking about how you can organize people and teams to learn faster and move faster. I invest in tooling that increases the speed of learning. Do anything we can to say, okay, how can we learn fast? Or what's the best way of learning about this, and how do we do it quickly? Releasing faster, taking small steps, many different things you can do. But yeah, rule number 3, experiment. I hope a lot of people are now doing this. I'm not sure that people are organizing and optimizing the speed of learning. Like, you can really look at an organization, you can create the culture, but you can also invest and do lots of things which will speed people up or speed up learning. I'm going to run over time, but I'm just going to keep going. How tight are we with time? Okay, cool. All right, so this gentleman is quite interesting, actually. So the next rule is something that I learned from seeing companies at different growth stages, and the different personalities or types of people that are successful or are perhaps needed at different stages. And this is an interesting personality. So this is Hugh Hendry, fascinating character. He was a macroeconomist, so someone who really tried to understand like what would change national and world economies over time. Super smart, constantly reading, learning, and thinking. He ran his own hedge fund, investing in very big ideas. I think he's like now a niche economist influencer on Twitter or something. He's kind of back now doing some strange things. Super interesting character, very smart. And he's always thinking like on a macro level, like really, really big ideas, and big ideas about the world economy. He was extremely accurate and successful about predicting what would happen in, during, and after the global financial crisis in 2008 and 2009. Like as a result, he made a lot of money while everyone else was losing a lot of money. But it was this kind of like big bets and not people really didn't understand what was going on. Unfortunately, after that, he was not so successful. And eventually he decided to close his hedge fund down and return the funds to investors and just go and do something else. I think he's living on a tropical island, like building houses and stuff now. Very interesting character. And this is what he said at the time. He said, an industry had been created and people were seeking captains and sailors, not pirates. If you think about this and stages of growth, and actually tech companies, I think this is also very accurate or like very similar analogy. Like when he was, so we say earlier with his hedge fund, people were thinking big, like placing very big bets on big macro ideas. And then the industry changed to a place where the industry wanted managers, like people you knew who were not risk takers, but kind of managed risk. And they had very organized systems with low risk. And people who followed orders, right? So late stage, you had like captains and sailors, like people who followed orders and were very process driven. Early stage, you had these pirates who were thinking big, like taking really big risks. And I think this just really follows through in terms of tech companies and startups as well. I'm not going to talk about this image to save a bit of time. I think the same is exactly true for product managers. Just to go back, like tech startups, like the people who found these companies are naturally big risk takers. And as they grow and get bigger and bigger, you inevitably need people to manage and take responsibility for other people. And if you've got a very successful business, then actually like the CEO is then a different CEO than the growth founder. And it's all about, okay, how do we manage the business sustainably? How do we have better processes, etc. So the character of people changes over time in growth companies. I think there's also an analogy for product managers. You've probably seen these two extremes, right? So there's those who are always working on big ideas and only want to work on big, like very risky bets that take a lot of time and investment and will probably fail. And then perhaps you've also seen like the very risk averse product manager really doesn't or just will not take risks, wants to do lots of analysis, lots of user research, think small and needs a lot of information and certainty before like investing or doing anything. So this is of course like two extremes of personalities and two extremes of risk profile. I have seen and worked with both though. This is like real, I have multiple examples of these like two extremes in my mind. And as someone who's like managing a whole product and product organization and product managers, like I found that something that I always have to be evaluating and doing is recalibrating my risk profile and recalibrating the risk profile of the product and what we're investing in. So there's no like hard and fast rule. People like to say, oh, what split should we have between optimization and small steps and like big risk or, bigger bets? Like there's no hard and fast rule. But what I did see at both every company I've been in is that there's a tendency to skew in a certain way, and then a tendency not to recalibrate. And I've seen this really catch up on companies where they've overinvested in a lot of big bets and everything failed, or on the opposite side where they've like totally calibrated towards small steps, doing lots of optimization. And of course, like at some point that just has a limited runway. And when you run out of runway, the growth stops. So constantly recalibrate your risk profile. The final one, I'm going to try and wrap up now because I'm definitely quite a bit of a time. So as I said, early in London, I was lucky enough to find some really great mentors. And one of them was Ed Freifogel, who was the CEO of startup Nestoria. It's the first startup I ever worked in 15 years ago. And he loved to use this story and metaphor. And he did tell this to me. He's like, yeah, be like Bowie. Like David Bowie is just this constant and phenomenal reinventor. And I love this image because you just look at every stage, and not even decade, like every few years, he was totally changing his identity. And then not only he's totally changed the music he was making. So while this is great personal advice of like, you know, constantly reevaluate, constantly reinvent, you need to be, scaling your business organization like needs people to change, and it needs people to scale with it. So I also saw this like catch out a lot of people, and indeed it caught me out. I ran into like real problems because like what was required of me, you know, plus 12 months in the future was totally different from what was required of me before. You know, you go from, okay, I work with one team. It's like, oh, now I'm responsible for 5 teams. Oh, now I'm responsible for 10 teams. Oh, now I'm responsible for 20 teams. Like people get overwhelmed by this very quickly. And then what you often find is that you don't have somebody to replace you, or you don't have the team members who are ready to take on the added responsibility of something like a lot, because you need essentially someone to replace your old role every 10 months. I suddenly need somebody to manage 10 teams. So you actually really have to take risks with people early, because otherwise they won't be growing fast enough, and then you won't have the people you need in your organization to take on that responsibility. It's actually much lower risk to do it early than it is to do it late. You know, early you invest in somebody, give them a direct reports, or have them managing a certain area. 12 months later, they've grown and they've learned how to do this. They can certainly take on more responsibility, versus suddenly you have 20 teams and you need one of your team members to take on responsibility for managing 10 teams. Like, that is a huge step. So take risks with people. People really grow with challenge, but take it early rather than late. Like much less risk to give more responsibility early than it is to give them late. And with that, yeah, those are the 5 rules. I'll flick back to that, but then also, of course, good reason to be here apart from talking to people other than myself, my dog. I'm always hiring. We're going to scale to 1 billion users, and I need really strong people to join what's already a really strong team. So if you're interested, please take a look. Now I'll flick back to that, and I'm going to stop talking.
Thank you very much, Christopher. I would ask you to stop sharing for some time, but we can maybe put the slide back on in a bit. I will share my screen instead and invite everyone to prepare their questions now, so you can post them already in the chat wherever you're watching us, on Zoom or YouTube or LinkedIn. We will start reading the questions shortly. And to give you time to prepare this, I want to use the chance to say short few more words about product people. I promised you to tell you more about the use cases where product people work as interim PMs. And I know that many people are also surprised to hear that PM product manager job could be an interim, because it feels like this should be a very intense job at the company. But there are some cases when we proven to be successful and support the company in a limited contract. And the main use case are listed here. So it's either that the team needs to grow quickly, and because there's new funding, there is intense growth, and the recruiting takes time. As we all know, recruiting permanent role takes several months, up to half a year or 9 months in Germany. Other cases that the PM is going on parental leave or other extended leave of absence. Maybe the PM you had has left the company, and again, hiring takes longer. Or there's maybe a temporary initiative that you want support for a few months, doesn't make sense to recruit a person for that. Or you need some help to upskill your team, to help coach the new PMs, and then they are becoming independent. So these are the cases where we have proven to be successful. Don't only trust myself, but also here are some examples of reviews from our clients. Our clients usually compliment us on being very quick to onboard, figure out what's the main challenges and what are the key things to pay attention to, and also then do a good handover to the new PM who joins the team on a permanent basis. These are our team members, product people, and as well as Christopher just mentioned, we are also hiring. So if you're looking for a dynamic group of very diverse backgrounds where you could work on this short-term engagements, we have a product manager position open. We also are recruiting for talent acquisition manager, because as we discussed at the beginning and what Christopher mentioned in his last rule, recruiting people and giving them new challenges is a full-time job, I would say, and we are looking for a talent acquisition manager to help us extend our team. So if something of this sounds interesting to you, or you know someone who would be interested, please refer them to our join page. So it's productpeople.join.com, and there are more information on how to apply. And now let's go to Q&A. I think it might be a good idea, Christopher, if you share your slide again, because it gives us a good background to start the discussion with the 5 rules. I will stop sharing now and invite you to do this. And I'm going to check if we have already some questions ready. Yeah, I see one question on YouTube. I also invite people on Zoom to raise their hands if they want to ask questions with their voice. It's also possible. And question on YouTube is the following: how do you find the winning formula?
Yeah. So obviously I've had some experience in that. I was a company that had one. You know what? There's multiple resources online, and when I was looking at DeepL to analyze how we'd grown and what the growth engine was, obviously I had the booking one in my mind, but I just looked online, and there's some great resources where they've mapped out this growth engine for multiple companies like Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, yada yada. So yeah, if you look around for network effects, and then also like flywheels, I looked at multiple examples for different companies, and then made a whiteboard behind me or a piece of paper, mapped out what I thought had driven growth for people. So yeah, like start off with network effects. So my dog is busy making a lot of noise. Start out with network effects. So you know, all of the big tech companies, like the really big ones, the reason they're there is they found some network effect, which they had either stumbled across organically, or at some point they realized, oh yeah, we can use this as a network effect. I think most of them just find it organically, frankly. So have a look at that. And then I thought about what network effects we had at DeepL. And then I looked at these other growth engine examples of flywheels for other companies. And I realized actually we're kind of closest to Google. And then I was just like able to sketch it out. In fact, yeah, in fact, behind me. So this is why you should have like magnets. Yeah, this was, yeah, that was the first DeepL flywheel, which I sketched out. And,
nice.
you know, now we have a fancy one that we've done in Photoshop, but yeah, like, yeah, and don't underestimate, like, just draw it. Took me a couple of goes to get to this, but like mapping it out visually and physically with your hand is like a good like brain technique, right? That's why we do these things with whiteboards and etc.
Thanks for sharing that. I very related question, but also maybe a step backwards. How do you start? So let's say there is a product, it is developed a certain stage and you want to now enable growth. Is there one single thing, like one single point where it's good to start with, or you would just directly go into trying to understand the growth will for the product and work and select the 3 priorities, as you said, and then work from there?
I think, and although this might seem like a bit of a cheap answer, like when you don't know, figure out what you want to test and test some stuff. Right? So I think if you're really early on in the product, you're just not going to know. So you have to try some things and see what works. And yeah, you know, I mentioned like optimize for speed of learning. Yeah, like there's things you can do which maybe are like more expensive early on, like, you know, spending quite a lot of money on AdWords or something like this. Or there's cheaper ways you can do it, but like, yeah, if you don't have growth now, then you have to just experiment fast and see what works. Like if you've achieved growth, it's quite interesting. Like a lot of companies get there organically, and they don't really know how they got there, but they did.
The dog agrees, I see. Yeah.
She thinks it's time for me to stop talking to other people and to play with her. That's what she thinks. So yeah, early stage, like experiment really fast and as fast as you can, and don't be afraid to like drop something early. I think there's people highlighted in the survey. Typically user acquisition is one of the biggest problems. I don't think I've got any specific answers on how to solve user acquisition because it is like a tough topic in general. And yeah, clearly people indicated that's like one of the biggest problems for them. Excuse me. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think so. I think there is an answer, even though it's hard to answer it fully, or like there is no simple rule of thumb to go with. So I understand.
As I also said, like a lot of it is luck, right? So
yeah,
people obviously have real expertise at certain areas, but then, you know, like AI had done nothing for a decade. Like I gave up on AI. I was of the generation where it had all the promises in the 90s. Nothing materialized in the 2000s. I was like, this is a dead technology. And then suddenly, like there was breakthroughs with neural nets and deep learning. And the very intelligent people at DeepL were like, oh, okay, let's see if we can use this. And it worked. You know, obviously, there's a huge amount of complexity and depth underneath that, but yeah, a lot of it is also luck and timing. Same is true for booking. Like we figured out certain things earlier than other people, and we were there at the right place when people were transitioning from offline to online. So it's also quite a lot of luck and timing, frankly.
All right. Thanks for the honesty in this. I think not everyone is accepting this fact, but I think it is definitely a fact of real life.
Or get billions of dollars from SoftBank, and like, okay, talking about user acquisition and my favorite subject, like people think TikTok is like viral growth, or it's like organic. But no, TikTok spent billions of dollars acquiring users, like billions. They got viral growth once they hit a tipping point of like, okay, now we've got so many users on the platform, it actually draws in other people because they want to see the content, and then there's more value with more creators, etc. They spent billions of dollars getting it to anywhere near like a stage where it was going to grow virally from that. So yeah, and sometimes you just also need to spend money if you're going to solve user acquisition problems.
Good point. All right, follow-up questions from YouTube. How do you set priorities and handle trade-offs, resource conflict, long, short-term objectives? What functions are you minimizing or maximizing? So trade-offs for growth.
It's a very, very big question. I mean, okay, like prioritization, again, like maybe like a cheap answer, but like prioritize the impact, right? So I certainly have changed strategy over the last 12 months. Some things that we were doing, we're like, hey, this is going to be really good for monetization and revenue, etc., etc. So certain point I was like prioritizing what I thought was the right impact. But now, having changed strategies, I see there's stuff which is short term. You'd look at and go, okay, that's just not going to like drive revenue because we sell subscriptions, and this is not going to add subscriptions. This is just going to add more users. But you know, actually, we figured out with DeepL that having a lot of free users was our growth engine because we grow via word of mouth. We've got the best quality experience and the best quality translation. So if people actually use us, then they tell their friends, and that brings more people to the platform. And then some of them will eventually actually get a subscription, or like we're top of mind for businesses when they want a subscription. So yeah, I mean, it's a cheap answer, but you always prioritize the impact. A great product manager, you know, there's obviously things they do about customer focus and yada yada yada, but your number one job is maximizing the ROI or maximizing the impact of your team. So that's the number one job of a PM. How do I prioritize, or how do I like? I prioritize bigger bets and investments, like in terms of scope. And investments typically means, you know, where we're going to put more people and build more teams. So I actually prioritize that by looking at our flywheel and thinking, what is the fastest, or what will push this flywheel fastest and furthest most? So I actually do that by looking at the flywheel. And yeah, prioritize for me is investing in people and teams. Where do they go and what's their scope? So yeah, like I look at the flywheel and figure out what's going to push that fastest in the shortest amount of time. So as any other prioritization framework, expected impact versus effort. But yeah, like most of the prioritization is done by the teams and the PMs themselves. Like if you want to move fast and have the maximum impact, then you want highly autonomous PMs and teams who are making these decisions for themselves. There's a very big question. So I maybe talked a lot about prioritization, and I talked a bit about investments, more strategic bets.
Maybe
I also don't believe in like hard and fast rules. Like hard and fast rules is just like you pick up an MBA playbook, and you know, consultancy is like an MBA playbook, right? They just say these are the things you do, and then you copy paste it on any situation you're in. And I don't think these people make great product managers. Strategy is emergent. You don't want to sit down and spend 6 months writing a strategy because it's just not going to be correct. Versus learning fast, monitoring all the time, being able to adjust very fast and learn more. Like a strategy emerges over time, gains clarity over time, but then also, frankly, like it should change quite rapidly also if you're doing it right. Like I don't want a 12-month roadmap from the team in infinite detail, because I know that anything more than 6 months out is just going to be fantasy. Like we should know what we're working on in the next 3 months with pretty good clarity. We should understand what's going to have the most impact. Stuff in the next 3 months after that, so up to 6 months, like sure, we should have a pretty good idea of like what's coming next. But like anything beyond that is really just a fantasy. And it's nice to have an idea of where we're going. We have some longer term goals. But yeah, you ever show me like a 12-month roadmap that was completely delivered on and it was all the right thing to do, and it just doesn't exist. Like, I should be learning fast enough by doing some rapid experiments that actually I invalidated one area I thought was super important, so I'm just not going to work on that anymore. And the best product managers, again, will tell you, yeah, actually, I changed my goals because we found out that this isn't valuable. We figured out something else was more valuable to work on. So I'm also not a big fan of OKRs. Like OKRs and these other things can produce so much rigidity in terms of what you're working on, and then also rigidity of thought. Like I have to complete these things versus actually, am I learning fast enough? Have I figured out something more important to work on? So yeah, I think all these things should be very fluid. And I'm gonna lock the door because my dog is really being a bit naughty. Oh yeah, not a big believer in concrete processes and frameworks. Big believer in autonomy and being fluid.
I understand. This is also a very interesting topic. I do agree with you fully that this is the art of product management. Is that is hard to set a set of rules that you follow and you will be successful. You actually have to take so many factors in consideration to adapt it and also be able to adapt quickly. And this is what makes a good product manager and distinguishes them from not great one. And while adapting quickly is important, there still should be some kind of vision, right? And some direction you're going, and it should be clear. So there should be some goal setting done. And while this is a super interesting topic, I want to go back a bit backward to the experimentation. And we have a follow-up question, which I think is very valid. How fast do you decide, do you make a decision or make a judgment if what you learned, if you were wrong or you were correct, and when do you correct the course? Is it that you run something for 2 weeks, let's say like a sprint, and then make a decision, or how do you usually go about it?
Yeah, this dog is driving me nuts this evening. Well, okay, if you're following like proper experimentation, which a lot of people don't, frankly, there's a lot of very poor practice when it comes to experimentation in the industry. It's super interesting. Like any decision was very dependent on traffic and the impact of that experiment. So yeah, like there's areas of our product, for example, like talking about strategy and change. Like I was quite invested in one area where we thought we could have a really high impact, and we were running experiments. And then it became clear, like, oh, actually, because of how our product works, the traffic there is small, and to have a valid statistical result you can trust, then I'd need to run an experiment for 3 or 4 months. So I was like, okay, stop investing, go elsewhere where the traffic is. But yeah, like there's a lot of poor experimentation practice. I've had the luck that I've worked with real experts and learned from them. But also, like, you can seek out real experts and like read papers or like how these people are doing. And yeah, it's implemented very poorly in a lot of places. And yeah, like understand how long you need to run an experiment for to be able to measure the impact. And yeah, if you're early stage and there's no traffic, then you also shouldn't be running experiments because there's no point. So again, like I see people making a mistake of want to test and run experiments. It's like, okay, but at a certain stage, yes. Like if you're really early stage or part of the product just doesn't have much traffic, then like often, unless it's huge with potentially really big impact, but I don't know, like it's not many products where you're going to see like 30% changes unless you've done something terribly wrong, which could be the case. I don't know, but yeah. Before booking, I worked on like B2B stuff, where very low volumes of customers. It made no sense to experiment there, like none whatsoever. So yeah, like with experimentation, like you should really understand. Excuse me. You should really understand significance, and not just significance, but power. Power is often completely overlooked, and if you look at power, you could find that actually, like, yeah, there's no point running experiments because you're going to wait 3 months.
Right. So basically, you're saying that for good experimentation, you mostly, and understanding how long to run it, you would rely on statistical apparatus. You calculate how much, what's your expected difference and how long this would take. And if the traffic is not enough in the certain product or certain feature, then rather not invest time there, but work on something else. How would you advise to go for early stage product when there is still not much traffic, but you still want to experiment and learn quickly?
I mean, typically there's some lead metric for sure. I mean, if it's early stage, you sure monitor, but if it's early stage, I think it's really just about moving fast at that point, and you can optimize later. I mean, like DeepL, if you look at it now, I mean now it looks very different, but like when I joined, you know, it didn't seem like there was that much change over 6 months to a year. Now it feels like it has changed a lot. But you know, it got to be a successful product long before I arrived, and there was no experimentation back then. But they definitely knew how to do certain things very well. So yeah, like, yeah, also don't fall into the trap that experimentation is the answer to everything. Like, obviously I'm a big fan and it really helps you to understand impact, but like early stage, probably just not necessary either. It is necessary to monitor and to have metrics and understand, okay, are our lead metrics going in the right way? But yeah, like, I think people are also perhaps a little bit over invested at early stage in these things, when yeah, might not really help you at all.
Yeah, that's also interesting notion. I agree that there is often people tend to fall in, or product managers tend to fall into extremities. Sometimes they're like, experimentation is the answer to everything, let's run experiments everywhere, disregarding the low traffic or very early stage product, or the other extremities saying user research is everything and we will do intensive interviews with people and try to find answers there, which also might be a bit too much.
Yeah, I would say experimentation is a tool, but it's not a strategy. And yeah, like obviously with extremes, but I have observed this is an extreme where, you know, strategy was just outsourced to experimentation. Number goes up, good. Number goes down, no, bad. But then like no thought about overall strategy. Yeah, experimentation, if you've got scale or enough traffic, is going to help you execute on your strategy. But it's definitely not a replacement for it.
All right. I am being mindful of our time and would like to thank Christopher. At this point, I know we had a couple more questions we didn't get to, but I invite you to reach out to product people and we can transfer the questions to Christopher and get his feedback, or maybe reach out to him directly, especially if you, as he invited, interested in applying at the DeepL. Christopher, if I could ask you to please stop sharing and I will share my closing slide. I thank everyone. Yeah,
I will, but only after I've done this. I'm gonna stop sharing after doing that.
Great, thanks. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, for your participation, questions, responses to the two questions from my side and from Christopher's side. Join us again in the weeks to come. Every Tuesday, we have a new topic to talk with you about. Find us on Meetup. Product Management People is the group. Join our chat on Telegram, Get Product People. We continue discussions there after talks, or you can also come with your questions and hear feedback from the peers. If you want to support us, you can support us on Patreon. We run this event outside of our working hours, so it's volunteer work and we still need to pay for tools. So if you want to support us monetarily, we're very thankful for that. Thank you once again, Christopher, and we happy to see everyone else again. Bye.